you see, the healthcare spectrum broadening, and going just beyond hospitals and diagnostics, both in terms of specialties and also about going beyond the tier 1 towns?
Thanks, Ashish. So I think, as you rightly pointed out, multi-speciality was the key focus of investment dollars till 5 years back. And I think over the last 5 years, diagnostics has clearly emerged as a preferred segment within the healthcare industry. And now single speciality is the other one which is really driving for the last 2-3 years. In single speciality, there could be 2-3 cuts that I can think of. One would be on a type of specialty, so the ophthalmic, diabetes, dialysis, those kinds of sort of clinics focused on one single segment, and then trying to replicate that on a nationwide organized manner. Another one is the emerging trend of clinics focused on one particular segment of the market, call it maternity care or child care or geriatrics. There's an emerging segment out here. The third one, if I were to just think aloud, is something on primary clinics. So this is trying to replace the mom and pop doctors. And historically, overseas in the Western market, that's a large organized market. But India has typically had this family physician concept, which now 2-3 chains have been funded. They're trying to replicate that and do a standardized system across. So those are the 2-3 areas. And I think in terms of dollars, as you rightly pointed out, single specialty, for example, so looking at the numbers, for last year, almost absorbed $180 million, which was almost 2x the previous year. I think this trend is really catching on for the obvious reason in terms of asset intensity is much lower here and scalability potential is higher. So I think those are the things that we as investors have been sort of looking at from a spectrum of healthcare.
Sure. Manish, you've been one of the early investors in single specialty with your investment in Medfort. I mean, how do you see these models from a scalability perspective, replicability and scalability perspective, and what are the challenges really in realizing that scale?
I think when it comes to single specialty, most of the business model which we have seen before, and one of them where we are there as a financial partner, we see a huge potential in terms of the opportunity that exists to tap into an unaddressed market. And there are examples where people have been able to scale it up very successfully. Having said that, I think one of the biggest challenge we see is in terms of attracting and retaining talent. Scalability, just by opening centers, getting into new geographies doesn't serve the purpose as may be the case with many of the other consumer businesses. But when it comes to healthcare, I think the most critical factor is the talent part of it. So I think that's the biggest challenge we see, whereas scaling up single specialty is concerned. The second, I would say, is the whole the integration process and ensuring there are standard processes and practices being followed across those centers, because we are talking about a brand identity. We are talking about a consumer having certain expectation when he gets into a center which specializes in a particular delivery. So I think these are the two biggest challenges we see. A lot of successful stories, and I think the sector is catching up on some of those challenges. Initially, maybe there was a bit of learning curve for many of those enterprises, but I think huge potential to scale up and tap into this segment.
Okay, interesting. Rajesh, I mean, obviously some of these newer formats are young and may not typically attract high-ticket investments from private equities. How, in your experience, has alternative forms of funding like the one Brand Capital brings to the table, how do you, in your experience, how has that worked out?
So we've always looked at players which are going to create new categories, okay? Because we believe that at the end of the day, patients want care. Whether it is multi-specialty format or single format is incidental to them. They come because they want care. So a lot of our investments, like for example, Thyrocare, HCG, Richfield and all you've seen, all of them have been category creators. They've created new categories. So they may have started very small, but they became very big because they were catering to a need of the consumer, right? So that's how we've looked at those. And in that new category creation, the brand visibility is a very important ingredient, and that is what we have provided, right? So as against, in the earlier stages, about 7-8 years back, we were supporting people who were trying to create brands in the asset-heavy space. In fact, now with the new Springboard model, we have gone completely into asset-light space. So we're saying there are enough assets which already exist in the country. So you can create a services model on top of it, a brand-led services model. So for example, Lifespan is one of our investments in that domain. So we would always target category creators, new category creators, and not necessarily chase a category which has already been established.
I think most healthcare companies are now realizing that, brand awareness is also a very integral part of the entire business thesis. And of course, what you guys are doing is something unique in that sense. So that, if I come to you, obviously we're talking about these new segments, but there's still a plethora of investment opportunities still in hospitals and diagnostics and med devices. What kind of differentiators do you look for when you're investing or evaluating some of these opportunities? And maybe let's take a specific example. Let's take hospitals. You've got, what are your thoughts on differentiators over there?
Yeah, I think clearly, if you're investing in a hospital group or a standalone hospital, a couple of things you're looking for. The whole hospital operation is a fairly complex operation where, the infrastructure, the, technical manpower, the doctors all come together to deliver a service. And so, clearly for growth, you need to set up additional facilities. And so, you want to see somebody who has either a track record or demonstrates the capabilities required to set up new facilities and get them up and running really fast in an efficient manner. Because if you look at the hospital space, you pretty much put up all the investment upfront, which is a fairly large amount. Yeah. And then it is about utilization. And the time you take from the day you acquire land and start constructing to when you get to break even can significantly increase the investment in the hospital. Yeah. So I think one is about the whole, the budgeting and, doing the capital expenditure, figuring out which is the best location, not only from the perspective of costs and economics, but also the demand catchment. And most importantly, doctors. And oftentimes it's easier putting up a facility than to get doctors for it. And really somebody who, we always look for 1, 2, or 3 people within the organization who can actually go out and build a value proposition for doctors to get them to practice in their hospital. Because every rupee of revenue you generate in a hospital is through a doctor. And I think this is an area, as more and more hospitals are coming up, people are realizing that the real differentiator in the market will be your value proposition for the doctor. Do you give them freedom to practice, try out new things? Do you support them with academic inputs? And the way you build out your departments and build skilled younger cadre of doctors. Right. And so I think this whole aspect of setting up new facilities and building a value proposition for doctors is sort of the two key things. Yeah.
Sid, Manish spoke about challenges in scaling of the newer segments in terms of standardization of SOPs, and especially in single specialties, etc. What kind of challenges have you come across or have seen commonly in place in terms of post-investment, especially in terms of realizing the investment thesis, in terms of scale up or other challenges really from a post-investment perspective?
Yeah. So, are you talking specifically about single specialty or?
No, in general. I mean, hospitals and the general healthcare space.
Yeah. So I think this is an overall issue that, just the execution part. I mean, you can see the demand in the market. You can set up a facility and you can start operations. But the quality of execution and delivering ultimate outcomes for the patient, it takes a lot of time. And I think people who are able to sort of set in very standardized systems, processes, sort of bring the organization knowledge to bear on setting up new facilities, it becomes really critical because there are areas which traditionally the healthcare services industry is not focused on so much, but today to build a good brand in the healthcare space, customer service, the overall experience is becoming important. So if you go to a hospital and get a surgical procedure done, the doctor may do an excellent job with you, but you are unconscious at that point in time. And what you really take away, the patient takes away, is everything else that he experiences in terms of, how long did it take to get registered, be able to see a doctor, the quality of nursing care, and most importantly, I think this is a metric we like to track in our investee companies is from the time you're given a discharge, how much time does it actually take for you to get a bill, which is correct, accurate, and you can actually leave the hospital. So I think there are a lot of challenges which are executional in nature. Also, the industry faces a huge shortage of talent. People in the hospital industry know how difficult it is to get qualified nurses who are experienced. That's traditionally been a challenge. I think the industries realize that if you want good quality personnel in the nursing space, you have to pay better. And I think you are seeing revision in the pay scales, etc., for the nurses. And so I think it's a lot of, given the operational complexity in a hospital, it is the ability to execute, get a whole lot of things together to deliver those outcomes and customer experience, which are really the challenges.
Manish, I mean, just adding on to the hospitals and, management should be delinked from, how do you see that theme evolving and do you see that as an important step towards professionalizing and, is that one of the challenges that you see from an investment thesis standpoint?
No, I think Ashish, a very valid point. Of course, that depends upon what kind of a business model we are talking about. But in general, yes, I think that's something which the healthcare industry needs to get a bit more deep into and address that. You do come across situations where you have a doctor entrepreneur and he is driving the whole business model. So the question which arises is, is the business model, is the doctor capable of institutionalizing that? Sharing his talent and experience with his other colleagues and attract other talent. I think that's very, very critical. Otherwise, we are talking about a business which is very centric to an individual, and then we are not talking about a corporate kind of a setup. And if it's not a corporate setup, then the question is, what kind of value creation are we talking about? What kind of scalability and profitability we are talking about over a period of time? I think that's something which even I would say before inviting capital, the promoter entrepreneur should get deep into and try and find some kind of innovative solution around that. I mean, we have seen that in past in multi-specialty, but more so with a lot of single specialty business model coming, the emerging trend which we are seeing recently. I think that's something which one needs to address upfront.
Right. So do you want to add to that? I mean, I know you've got very divergent models in both your investee companies. I mean, what's been your experience like?
Yeah, I think overall the doctor turned entrepreneur model works really well.
Right.
The important thing to note there is that the doctor who becomes an administrator should not have the conflict in terms of his own practice. And for us, in one of our investments, that has worked very well. Doctors are very sharp people. They also have the respect of the other doctors in the system because they understand what providing healthcare means. Yeah. And so they are also able to get respect from the entire technical doctor team. On the other hand, we also have an investment which is say a Manipal hospital, which is completely a professional team running it. I think both models work, but it depends on the kind of team that you build around you. So even in a professional setup, you need some doctors who take up the onus of, driving the protocols, how the whole clinical practice should be driven. And so I think eventually it boils down to, do you have a team at the top which has all the skills? It may not reside in one person, but do you have the right mix of skills in the team is what becomes important.
Fair enough. Rajesh, one of the common questions that we get from in the minds of the potential investing companies is, what value does a private equity bring to the table? And I know, would you share your experience of working with some of your investing companies in areas around brand building, and how did that pan out?
Yeah, in fact, working along requires, more specifically working on innovations. Right? And innovation is a good word, all of us use it, but how many of us do it? We all know healthcare opportunity in India is big and can become bigger if you innovate, right? Now, a lot of times we PE players expect that the healthcare companies should innovate their models, they should come out with new things, right? But we as private equity players should also innovate along with them, and that is where I think we have been doing a lot of work in the past, because you see that PE models have not changed over the last 7-8 years. Okay, we are only expecting models in the healthcare space to change. So, when we initially funded all these healthcare ventures, we worked a lot along with the investee companies to help create these new concepts. So, for example, stem cell banking was a new concept, right? Diagnostics was a new concept. Cancer treatment was a new concept. Yeah. So from a brand perspective, if there's a new concept and it's brilliant and people can benefit it, then how do you reach out to people, how you let people know, right? Yeah. That was an intervention of innovation we did at that stage, okay? But now we realize that we also need to innovate and go much further in funding these or helping these new ventures, right? Right. So for example, recently we realized that diabetes in India is a big problem, right? And there's no organized play, so to say, on a national level, and very, very few people were wanting to attempt it. And we came across a very good business model. A doctor was practicing, whereas he developed a medical protocol that you could reverse diabetes in certain cases, right? So we realized that his medical protocol was excellent and it should be scaled up nationally. But how do you do that? Because that doctor was a doctor, not a businessman, right? So he couldn't do it. So we, in fact, proactively went across to other healthcare company, another who was large in the space and who had operational skills, right? And we told them that, why don't you start this? We'll support you, okay? And we'll support you in a big way. So for example, Lifespan is the case I'm making. So 200 crores is what we've invested in them, right? From a brand creation perspective. And we co-created with them an asset-light model where on a national level, these clinics will be scaled up. But instead of putting your own money into setting up clinics, this will be set up through a franchisee route where franchisees will only be doctors. Now doctors also in those cities who are MBBS, right, they also want to graduate upwards, right? So they also want to become part of a more specialized, more known brand, right? Sure. So again, even with a 200 crores investment to a startup, the owner will have a majority stake, so that's again in innovation at our end we've done. Yeah. So I'm saying innovation in healthcare space or even in other spaces, private equity and entrepreneurs both have to innovate. You cannot just let the innovation onus be resting on the entrepreneur. On the entrepreneur to do it. And this is interesting. IVF is also known to get operationally involved with almost all the investee companies. I mean, what are the one or two common areas that you've seen where private equities could add value, irrespective of subsector?
Yeah. So in our case, we have a separate operating team with a lot of experience who spend significant time. I think it's not only the specific assistance, but also the attitudinal construct with which you go and support a company. You want to be sitting on the same side of the table as the company. Sure. And so it's so in a board meeting, you're not asking why has this not happened or that not happened. You sort of engage on a very regular basis, monthly reviews. You're already aware of the problems and you're giving solutions or trying to come up with solutions. So there is this whole area of, the usual good management practices, right from, getting a good MIS, tracking whatever you want to actually achieve in terms of, how much time are you taking to discharge your patients? Are you doing customer satisfaction surveys and so on and so forth? I think one other big area is the whole project management and decision making for new facilities, which in the multi-speciality case is you make fairly large investments. Thinking through and doing formalized market studies, actually drilling down to the next level and saying that if you're going to put up a 300-bed hospital and you're going to have these 15 departments, where will you get the doctors from? Have you, 10 months before your hospital starts, how many doctors do you already have on board who are committed to coming in? I think that whole process of thinking things through in terms of the planning the project becomes very important. Right. The other area, of course, is in the area of inorganic growth. The PE skill set of evaluating companies, doing the documentation, negotiating, etc., is the other area where we typically get involved and play an active role.
Obviously, the way you would evaluate an ROCE, the private equity would evaluate ROCE, and some of these expansions in inorganics would be very different from what the doctors would. Coming on to our last topic around exits, and Raghav, what we've seen historically is that IPOs really haven't kicked off, and what we've seen is mostly they've been PE flipovers of investments. In some cases, we've seen promoter buyback of investments. But how do you see, different routes for exits kind of evolving? And will it really be a PE to PE kind of an exit model for some years to come, or do you see that changing very soon?
So I think on a predominant basis, on a last few year examples, PE to PE has been the main exit route, as you rightly pointed out. I think IPOs over time will come through, as many companies are now focused on creating a healthcare brand and taking their companies pan-India. So I think that will come up, but there's a scale threshold and a sort of sustained profitability metric and traction over the last 3-4 years that company need to show, and have a sort of clear-cut growth strategy in terms of business plan and then delivering to that. Because another problem which typically we've seen in the single specialty, the plan laid out is very easy and very logical to understand, that I have 20 clinics here, maybe in one geography or one state, and now I need to go to 75 clinics across, call it the Western region or maybe pan-India. But the devil is in the execution. So that's where I think companies have historically at least struggled to, given the factors around manpower or brand recognition. So I think that's where, if a company needs to go IPO, those things need to be clearly leveled out. I think strategic is an outcome people are betting on in the longer term. There have been few and far transactions till date. I think Davita was one. They bought a small asset in Bangalore. Yeah. But I think most people are betting on that over time, as some of these chains and centers attract decent traction, some of the overseas Western or Japanese companies may be looking to acquire them as a presence in Asia. I think those are the 3-4 exit routes which I see. So therefore, the dependence on PE to PE will come down in a medium term, I would say.
Medium term. Manish, you echo those thoughts in terms of single specialty and other newer formats also?
Yeah, also to just add to what Raghav said, we have been seeing a trend where most of the exits are happening through PE to PE kind of transaction. I think one of the challenge we may come across in those kind of exits is most of the private equity guys, whether it is Series B and providing an exit to an earlier investor is concerned, would look for a combination of primary and secondary, and that may have implication in terms of differential pricing between the primary and the secondary component, and may also have implication of significant dilution for the promoter. So I think that could be a slight roadblock in terms of finding a solution around exit, whereas PE to PE is concerned. Whereas single specialty formats are concerned, we have seen some of the large healthcare groups getting into that. We have also seen the first generation entrepreneurs setting up single specialty chains. Our understanding is many of these large business groups may not be interested in buying them out because they don't see much of value except some kind of a locational presence. Having said that, I think there could be a trend where there could be a consolidation among the various single specialty player to create a larger platform. And with a large platform, then there could be a possibility of either looking for a strategic option, which could be to a domestic player or to an international player, or with a larger platform, maybe there could be an opportunity to tap into the public market. I think that's the initiative which the private equity community, along with some of the platform company, needs to work upon. And I think it's a matter of time. That's something which we strongly believe eventually would emerge.
Great. I've got a bunch of questions from the audience, and I know we're running out of time, so we'll quickly go through them. I think one common question that I've got from more than 3 or 4 questions is around the entire health IT space. And while we've talked about delivery formats, I mean, any views in terms of how you view that, and you see from an investment standpoint the attractiveness of health IT as a sector? Manish, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the innovative model we believe would come up, and we are seeing some enterprise getting into that, is telemedicine, which is very IT driven. That would also help in capital efficiency. It will help in addressing a larger market. It would also bring down the cost of delivery for both the hospitals and for the consumer. So that's something which I think we see a trend coming up, and it would also penetrate into addressing the tier 2 market, which today tertiary care in tier 2 is a bit of challenge.
Okay. So the other question around med devices and indigenization and catering to the Indian market, innovation around the Indian market is obviously an important factor. How do you see that evolving, and do you see Indian companies now competing against global players who are still the market dominators?
I think that's a space which will really grow. If you look at the situation today, we import 70% of all medical equipment in the country.
Yeah.
And a lot of countries have gone through a transition. If you look at a country like China, where for a very long period of time they also had similar levels of imported medical equipment. But as the market grows, the domestic companies start coming into the market, and in India clearly it's going to be a price-driven game. Because one big disconnect in the Indian healthcare space today is that the one area where the cost structure is not aligned with the Indian market is in medical devices.
Sure.
And equipment. So I think we are already seeing a lot of domestic players entering segments. Currently, entering segments where there is less technology involved. So they might not go in and do a CT or MRI, but they might, X-rays is pretty much being manufactured in India. And since cost is the major issue, you don't necessarily need a 128 slice CT for everything. And so I think there's a huge market where people are okay to use a technology which is 5 years old, but still works if they can actually get treatment. And we are already seeing a whole plethora of Indian equipment manufacturers who are coming up. Also, I think the one big trend we've seen is making products specifically for India. So, we know GE, for example, manufactures in India products customized for the Indian market. So in some ways, it's like with 80% of the features at 40% of the cost.
Right.
And I think that is what is really taking off. So having products specifically to meet Indian market requirements, both in terms of price and features. And I think over time you will also see certain areas where diseases which are more specific to India, more innovation happening there, because globally that may not be as relevant.
Right. So Rajesh, one last question is around the entire theme of around a service angle to healthcare and not just the delivery of. Do you see that extending to remote or point of care kind of care, and do you see an investment opportunity in such investments or in such businesses?
Yeah. I think in fact this whole servicing aspect in healthcare can be the next big thing.
Right.
Because as I said earlier, people at the end of the day, they are not wanting to go to a hospital, they are wanting to get treated.
Right.
So currently, in fact, in the market, we see that there's a lot of asset play happening, that there's a hospital, but then people's worry is, whether I'll get good treatment or not. So we've seen, in fact, some very innovative models coming up in the service space, like, for example, elder care treatment, okay, proactive treatment. So these are very service-based and asset-light. So they'll create a service layer and they will guide you which hospital to go, which doctor to go and all. And people see a lot of value in that because, at the end of the day, they want to make the best health decision for themselves. Right. And also in the proactive space. So I think going forward, we'll also see a lot of action happening in the proactive healthcare service space.
Great. I think this is a good note to end. I'm sorry, there were a lot of other questions which I couldn't take up for want of time, but the panel is available and we can probably discuss that on a one-to-one basis over lunch. Thank you so much. This was really enriching, and hopefully the audience has taken back some things on the topic. Thank you.